Solo is a Disney Star Wars film that was released on May 25th, 2018. Solo underwent the most troubled production in the history of the franchise, and out of all the Star Wars films, this is the one that seems to be the most forgotten and is never talked about. But what went wrong with Solo? Why were audiences furious about the casting choices? Why were there battles with producer Kathleen Kennedy? Why were the original directors fired? Why was Han Solo's original performance so off-key it was compared to Ace Ventura? Why did 80% of the film have to be reshot? And why is it the only movie in Star Wars history to become a box office bomb? Han Solo's past had first been explored by George Lucas during the writing process of Revenge of the Sith. He had written a scene where a 10-year-old Han Solo wandered around Chewbacca's home planet and had one line. However, Lucas ended up scrapping the scene. Another time, Lucas wanted to explore Han Solo's past in a TV show he wanted to create called Star Wars Underworld. Lucas wanted to depict scenes that were later shown in Solo, explaining how Han and Chewbacca first met and how Han won the Millennium Falcon from Lando Calrissian. Unfortunately, the studio concluded it was simply too expensive to produce Star Wars for television, and it was never made. Which makes sense, considering that The Mandalorian's budget was $15 million per episode and $120 million for a single season. And despite being the most watched show in the US, The Mandalorian still lost Disney a few $1 million. But so how did Solo get started? Well, in 2012, George Lucas had actually been developing a film about Han Solo before Star Wars was even bought by Disney. Lucas hired Lawrence Kasdan to write the movie, who had previously written The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and Raiders of the Lost Ark for Lucasfilm. Although, in late 2012, George Lucas announced that he would no longer be involved in Star Wars projects and had sold Lucasfilm to Disney. Disney immediately began developing their own sequel trilogy, and Lawrence Kasdan left working on Solo so that he could help with the writing of The Force Awakens. Kasdan left his son Jonathan in charge of writing Solo while he was gone, but he eventually returned after the writing of The Force Awakens was complete. In 2015, during all of the Star Wars buzz about The Force Awakens, Solo officially went into production, with Lawrence Kasdan and Jonathan Kasdan as the screenwriters. But Lucasfilm needed to find a director to helm the project. So, who did they end up choosing? It turns out, they didn't choose one director, they chose a duo of them. In 2015, Phil Lord and Christopher Miller were some of the hottest filmmakers in Hollywood. They had been successful in both animation and live action, and had just come off one of the best years directors could possibly have, with the release of The Lego Movie and 22 Jump Street. The Lego Movie made $468 million at the box office from just a $60 million budget, and launched a franchise of successful Lego movies, while 22 Jump Street, a sequel to 21 Jump Street, had a $330 million box office run from an $80 million budget, which is impressive for an R-rated comedy. Phil and Chris were making movies that were not only adored by critics, but that many people were going out to see, which, at the end of the day, is what Hollywood cares about the most. They had made successful movies based off a picture book, Lego bricks, and a 1980s TV show, which were all risky and difficult projects, but Phil and Chris always found a way to make them work. They were known to be funny, creative, and always brought tons of energy into their projects. So at this point in time, everyone wanted to work with them. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. They were offered to direct a Flash film for the DC Universe, a Ghostbusters sequel, a 23 Jump Street, and an untitled Star Wars film about Han Solo. They ended up choosing the Han Solo movie, saying it was their dream to direct a Star Wars film, and never even thought it was possible until then. On July 7, 2015, the project was officially announced, with Phil Lord and Christopher Miller set as the directors. Although, filming was not set to begin until January of 2017, a year and a half later. Why did they need that much time? Well, Lucasfilm was in a tricky situation. Harrison Ford as Han Solo was a fan favorite, and Solo was arguably the most popular character in the entire Star Wars franchise. So Lord and Miller immediately realized and later said that finding this role was the most difficult casting decision of all time. They had to capture a young Han Solo's charisma and daring nature and find the absolute perfect actor to portray him, or else fans would be pissed and could possibly even boycott seeing the movie. Star Wars fans are very passionate about their characters, and Lucasfilm knew they could not afford to mess up this casting. Lord and Miller went on a long and expensive search across the world for potential actors and saw over 3,000 people for the part. They visited several acting schools in the US and the UK, and even went to cowboy bars, trying to find the perfect actor for the part. Some of the finalists for the role included Miles Teller, Dave Franco, Logan Lerman, Nick Robinson, and Ansel Elgort. But it was eventually narrowed down to 3 actors: Taron Egerton, Jack Rayner, and Alden Ehrenreich. Lord and Miller ended up choosing Alden Ehrenreich, who is a 26-year-old actor best known for his supporting role in the Coen brothers film Hail Caesar. What was ironic about this decision was after seeing over 3,000 actors in the long and expensive casting search, Ehrenreich was actually the very first person to audition, the first one to walk in the room. So that long casting search was ultimately an enormous waste of time and money.
Kathy, I apologize for wasting that. It's nice to be sure, though.
Yeah. I've taken that out of your salary.
Okay, that's fair.
In May of 2016, Ehrenreich was revealed to be cast as young Han Solo, and 2 months later, he was revealed in the role at a Star Wars fan event in Europe. So how did Star Wars fans react to Ehrenreich's casting? Majority were not happy, to say the least. Although one could say it was an impossible role to fulfill, some complained that Ehrenreich did not look like Harrison Ford, and many said that they would have much preferred Ansel Elgort after seeing his performance in 2017's Baby Driver. Lots of Star Wars fans were complaining that the movie was even in production in the first place and said they hoped it would bomb, saying that they did not want a Han Solo movie to be made and were not interested in seeing a prequel about Han Solo's life. But when the rest of the cast was announced, there weren't any complaints. Christian Bale was considered for Tobias Beckett, a criminal and Han's mentor, but the role ended up going to Woody Harrelson. Donald Glover was cast as Lando Calrissian, and Emilia Clarke was cast as Kira, Han's childhood friend and romantic interest. On January 30th, 2017, Phil Lord and Chris Miller began directing Solo at Pinewood Studios in London, and shooting later moved to Italy. 4 months later, in May of 2017, filming shifted to the Canary Islands, and Lucasfilm decided to take some time to look at the past 4 months of footage they had received. After reviewing the footage, Lawrence Kasdan and Kathleen Kennedy were, well, they were pissed. It was an absolute mess. First, Kathleen Kennedy was appalled by the lack of camera setups that Lord and Miller used. They were only using 3 different camera placements rather than the average 12 to 15 that were used on most Star Wars films. This lack of camera variations gives very few options to use in editing the angles of the movie. There were also many issues with the production itself. Kathleen Kennedy was upset that the filming of Solo was going over budget and behind schedule. The crew was very displeased when they learned that they wouldn't be finished by July and would have to continue through August. Solo was behind schedule because Lord and Miller were filming too many takes on shots and stretching out days to experiment and let the actors improvise. They were asking for over 30 takes on each shot, and the actors who worked on the film said that after so many takes, it began to feel very weird. Another actor said that Lord and Miller didn't look like they knew what they were doing on set and would want a variety of different performances. He said they seemed unsure of what they wanted and always asked for a different delivery than the last take. One crew member also said that the assistant director had to step in and help the duo direct a lot of the scenes. He said that they were not at all concerned with the look of the film, and most of their direction was working with the actors. But when it came to improvisation, Lawrence Kasdan was the one who was furious. He was unhappy that they were going off of his script and implementing new lines into the film. He wanted the movie to be shot word for word from his script. But the most shocking part of the footage wasn't the new lines, the large amount of takes, or the lack of camera angles. It was the acting. Based off their background in comedy, Lord and Miller were expected to add a comedic touch to Han Solo's character, but Lucasfilm was appalled by the amount of humor that felt out of tone for a Star Wars film. Alden Ehrenreich's performance was so goofy, it was compared to Jim Carrey's Ace Ventura character.
Excuse me, I'd like to ask you a few questions. Alrighty then.
In fact, Ehrenreich was so concerned that Lord and Miller were trying to get the wrong performance that he told one of the producers about it, who ended up telling Kathleen Kennedy, which led the studio to review the footage in the first place. After a meeting with the studio, Solo went back into production, but this time, things were different. Lucasfilm sent Lawrence Kasdan to supervise filming, which Lord and Miller were very unhappy about. They felt that the studio had sent Kasdan to be a shadow director and basically babysit them into doing what he wanted. Lucasfilm also hired an acting coach for Ehrenreich to fix his performance and make him resemble Harrison Ford better. During this round of shooting, Lord and Miller made sure to film the scenes word for word from Kasdan's script before getting into any improvisation. But unfortunately, after the footage of the film was reviewed again, Lucasfilm was still unsatisfied, and they ended up making a wild decision. With only 3.5 weeks of shooting left to go, and 75% of the film already finished, Lucasfilm fired Phil Lord and Chris Miller and decided to reshoot the movie with a new director. This was not the first time Disney had issues with a Star Wars production. Similar to how they sent Kasdan to supervise the filming of Solo, they had also been unhappy with Gareth Edwards' direction of Rogue One, and they sent in veteran writer Tony Gilroy to rewrite certain scenes and supervise the filming and editing of the movie. Edwards was not fired from Rogue One, but there were other filmmakers who left Star Wars projects after frustrations with the studio. Josh Trank, who directed 2015's troubled Fantastic Four movie, was hired by Lucasfilm to direct a Boba Fett movie, but he quit less than a year later. Colin Trevorrow, who directed Jurassic World, was hired to direct the third film in the sequel trilogy, which ended up being The Rise of Skywalker, but he later was fired and replaced by J.J. Abrams. Michael Arndt, who wrote the film Toy Story 3, was hired to write The Force Awakens, but Disney rejected so many of his plots that he later left the project. It seems very clear from all of these incidents that Disney frustrated their directors and writers by not giving them much creative freedom at all. After it was announced that Solo's directors were fired, Kennedy, Lord, and Miller all declined interviews. Although, Lord and Miller later released a statement saying that their vision and process was not aligned with their partners on the project. They said they departed due to creative differences, but were proud of the work they did on the film and wished everybody the best. They did not comment any further and haven't spoke much about it since. They left to work on the Lego Movie 2 and Into the Spider-Verse. In an interview, some of the cast said that in terms of tone, Lord and Miller were not prepared to make a Star Wars film. Kathleen Kennedy later said that firing the duo was a very difficult decision to make, but the film was not working out as she had hoped, and there came a point where they had to move on. After the duo was fired, Bill Lawrence, who created the show Clone High with Lord and Miller, had his own take on the film, which you can read for yourself. This was not the first time Lord and Miller had problems with the studio when working on a movie. They were fired from the film Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs in 2006 after Sony disapproved of the script they had written, and after they were rehired to direct the movie, they were nearly fired again after they had trouble satisfying the studio with the story of the film. So what went wrong with Solo? Why were they fired? Well, it seems very clear that this was more of Lucasfilm's fault than Lord and Miller's. Lord and Miller were upset from the very beginning because they thought that, like earlier in their career, they were hired to make a movie that was unexpected and would take risks. But instead, it's obvious that this was a movie simply intended to be a service to Star Wars fans. Lord and Miller wanted to make a Star Wars film that was fresh and unique, but they constantly battled with Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm because they wanted to make a movie that was safe and would not stand out from other films in the franchise. One anonymous source said that Chris and Phil wanted the movie to be fresh, emotional, surprising, and unique, but every time they went to take a new, creative risk, it was always met with a no. It's clear that they were given zero creative freedom and were hired to make the movie exactly how Kennedy and Lucasfilm wanted it. She may not have known it at the time, but Kathleen Kennedy wanted a director who would have a conservative approach to the movie, take little risks, completely follow the script, and have a smooth production. So Lord and Miller were probably the worst possible people to hire for the job. Lord and Miller have said that they are always looking to make fresh movies that take risks and give the audience something that they were not expecting. So it makes sense that Lucasfilm and the duo eventually gave up and parted ways. But considering what Kathleen Kennedy actually wanted out of the film, she hired probably the best possible person to replace them. Clearly wanting to go in a different direction, Lucasfilm sought after older filmmakers who they knew would finish the project quickly and efficiently, rather than filmmakers who were young and ambitious and may give the studio a hard time. They wanted Kasdan himself to direct the movie and also considered veterans Joe Johnston and Ron Howard. However, Lucasfilm was not allowed to have Kasdan direct because it is a Directors Guild rule that a replacement director cannot be someone who is already involved with the production. Joe Johnston was known for directing Jumanji, Jurassic Park, and Captain America: The First Avenger, while Ron Howard was known for directing Apollo 13, A Beautiful Mind, and The Da Vinci Code. Ron Howard, who is 64 years old at the time, was the one who ended up taking on the project. In the late 90s, Howard was actually offered by George Lucas to direct the first Star Wars prequel, The Phantom Menace, but Howard turned it down because he said it was too daunting and he also wanted Lucas to direct it himself. After Kathleen Kennedy offered Howard to take on the troubled Solo project, he was reluctant at first. Ron Howard said that he personally knew Lord and Miller, and it felt wrong to step in and take over the movie. He probably also knew that Lucasfilm wanted someone who could get the film done quickly with little creative input, as they were still planning to release the movie on its scheduled date of May 25th, which meant that they had very little time to finish it. However, after having lunch with Kathleen Kennedy, Ron Howard agreed and stated that he was excited to take on the project. One production member said that when it was announced that Ron Howard would be taking over directing duties, the entire crew all started clapping. During Ron Howard's first day on set, George Lucas made a surprise appearance and gave him encouragement. Lucas spent all day on set with the cast and crew and even gave a suggestion for Ehrenreich in one scene. When Ron Howard began directing, he immediately earned respect on set. One crew member said that the key difference between Howard and the fired directors was efficiency. While Lord and Miller would ask for over 30 takes, Ron Howard would only need about 2 or 3, and the crew admired his confidence. Also, unlike Lord and Miller, Ron Howard was mostly focused on the look of the film, and the crew was impressed with many of the final shots. The cast also enjoyed working with Howard, as they said that he spoke the Star Wars language. Howard ended up reshooting about 70% of Lord and Miller's work, which was supposed to nail down the classic Lucasfilm tone. Reshooting this amount earned Ron Howard credit as director, which Lord and Miller did not challenge. However, Ron Howard said that Lord and Miller's fingerprints are all over the film, and in many scenes, he built on what Lord and Miller originally had. Shooting with Lord and Miller was originally supposed to finish in July, But after reshoots with Ron Howard were finally finished, it was then late October, and the film was still scheduled to come out in May. This meant that Lucasfilm had only about 5 months to finish post-production work, which was not a lot of time for a Star Wars movie. Solo had a bigger budget than The Force Awakens, and The Force Awakens had over a year for post-production work. When it came to visual effects for Solo, over 60 versions of the Millennium Falcon's design were created before they finally settled on the final version in the film. The visual effects team said that by far the hardest challenge to pull off was the train heist scene, as they wanted to make the explosion realistic. To practice explosions, the team utilized miniature models and also built a 3D model of the mountain in the film. When working on the explosions, the visual effects team took inspiration from the YouTube channel The Slow Guys. The Slow Guys filmed a slow motion video of firecrackers blowing up in a fish tank, which the visual effects team of Solo also did to help understand what an explosion in slow motion would look like. The main composer for Solo was not John Williams, as it was actually a composer named John Powell, who had had an extensive career in animated films. Powell started writing music for Solo after he finished working on the film Ferdinand. And although John Williams was not the main composer, he did contribute to the score, as he composed and conducted one Han Solo theme in the movie. Somehow, the crew did manage to complete post-production on time, but it was finished on April 22nd, which was just 2 weeks before the movie's premiere. A short teaser for Solo was first released during the Super Bowl, and its first official trailer was not released until April 8th, which was just a month before the movie's premiere. Solo's first premiere was on May 10th in Los Angeles, and it was released worldwide on May 25th. Solo didn't have much competition when it first came out, as basically nothing else was released in its opening weekend. However, the studio was worried because many people were still going out to see Avengers: Infinity War and Deadpool 2. Despite having little competition, Solo ended up being a massive flop in its opening weekend. It grossed $147 million, which was the lowest Star Wars opening weekend since Attack of the Clones, and the worst opening weekend out of all the Disney Star Wars films. After Solo's disastrous opening weekend, Variety immediately predicted that Solo would lose money for Disney. In its second weekend, Solo dropped 65%, and in its third weekend, Solo was outperformed by Ocean's 8, and by then, it was considered a failure. Solo had a $300 million budget, and by the end of its box office run, it needed to make at least $500 million to make back its combined budget and marketing expenses. Solo ended up making only $390 million, which officially made it a box office bomb and lost the studio over $100 million. It was the first Star Wars film to ever lose money, and that summer, films like The Incredibles 2, Jurassic World, Avengers: Infinity War, and Deadpool 2 all completely blew Solo out the water. But why did Solo have a terrible box office performance? Some say that by mid-2018, there was lots of Star Wars fatigue, as this was the fourth Disney Star Wars film to be released. Others say that many Star Wars fans were so furious after seeing The Last Jedi in December that they were done with Disney Star Wars after that. But there were other factors that went into it as well. Every Disney Star Wars film, except this one, had come out in December, and it seemed like fans were not expecting a Star Wars movie to come out in May and were caught off guard. Especially since its official trailer didn't come out until 4 weeks before its premiere, and it took Lucasfilm forever to release the title of the movie. So many people didn't even know this was coming out. Others might have also read about the troubled production of the film and decided not to bother with seeing it. Many Star Wars fans complained that they never wanted a Han Solo movie to be made, and they had no interest in seeing a story about Solo's past. Many also said that the movie answered questions that no one was even asking, and others said that the movie felt rushed and the story of Han Solo's past would have probably worked better as a TV show. But was the movie necessarily bad? Not really. Some people liked it, and many said it was okay. The critics' rating on Rotten Tomatoes was 69%, which actually was the lowest for a Disney Star Wars film at the time. And the audience rating was 64%, so it seemed like moviegoers thought it was decent and liked it better than the previous film, The Last Jedi. However, while many thought the movie was decent, many also said it was very forgettable, and they never planned on seeing it again. But to me, this is what Lucasfilm got from making a Ron Howard Star Wars film. Audiences thought it was kind of good, but there was nothing really fresh about the movie. Solo just sort of blends in with the rest of the Star Wars films, and there's nothing about Solo that makes you dying to see it again. It just feels like a safe movie that was not ambitious at all, and maybe that's why many people didn't go out to see it. Although, if Lucasfilm had let Lord and Miller make the movie they wanted to make, they would have tried to make the movie as ambitious and unique as possible, and would have made Solo stand out from the rest of the Star Wars films. After the success of the Snyder Cut, some have wondered if a Lord Miller cut could be released, but considering how horrified Lucasfilm was of the original cut, I doubt that will ever be happening. I definitely would be interested in seeing how different their cut of the movie would be though, especially with the Ace Ventura comparison. That's pretty scary. I can't even imagine what Han Solo would be like in an Ace Ventura-like performance. Sheesh. Personally, I walked out of the theater thinking this movie was pretty good, but I've never thought about it since or felt any inkling to watch it ever again. I always find that a good way to see how successful a movie is to see how many people are searching it up and viewing clips of it on YouTube. And the views for Solo are pretty lackluster. They're only really in the thousands compared to millions for the rest of the films, which shows that people just kind of forgot about Solo after they saw it and haven't felt a desire to see a certain scene again or anything. One thing I love about this is that Lord and Miller were fired from Solo because they were too ambitious and took too many risks, but immediately after they were fired, they left to work on the film Into the Spider-Verse, which came out the same year as Solo, and was a movie that was very ambitious and very risky, yet was way more successful than Solo, and made the same amount of money despite having a third of Solo's budget. That's what happens when you try to make a movie that's fresh, new, and unique, and not recycled action that we've seen a million times before. What did you think of Solo? Do you think it was a good Star Wars film, or do you think it would have worked better as a TV show? And did you think it was fair that Lord and Miller were fired, and would you ever be interested in seeing their version of the film? Also comment if you like the style of this video, and if there's anything I could do to make my videos better in the future. I'm gonna come out with some more videos like this soon, so thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all next time.